Let's talk about Robert Graves. Here was a guy, an English poet, novelist, and critic who managed to live in completely different worlds, all at the same time. You've got the mud of the trenches, the marble halls of ancient Rome, and then, somehow, the mystical forests of ancient myth. So, how did one writer inhabit all these incredible spaces? Well, that's what we're going to dig into.
Okay, so if you've heard of Robert Graves, chances are it's because of this voice, the stammering, overlooked Emperor Claudius. With his novel, I, Claudius, Graves didn't just write about ancient Rome, he basically plugged you right into it. All that political backstabbing and corruption suddenly felt like it was happening right now, making it shockingly real for modern readers.
But wait a second. How on earth does the mind that brought an ancient empire back to life come straight out of the trenches of World War I? That's the real puzzle here, right? It feels like two completely different people. And that's exactly the enigma we're going to piece together today.
To really get a handle on Graves the novelist, you absolutely have to start with Graves the soldier, because his entire literary journey kicks off in the hellscape of World War I. And believe me, what he saw there colored everything he ever wrote.
In his early poetry, stuff like Over the Brazier, Graves was part of this new wave of writers. These guys, think Siegfried Sassoon and Wilfred Owen, were looking at the war and saying, no more romantic nonsense. Their whole mission was to bear witness to the brutal, senseless reality of the trenches.
You gotta remember, before this, a lot of war poetry was all about heroism and glorious sacrifice. And then Graves comes along with his searing memoir, Goodbye to All That, and just blows that whole idea out of the water. He gives you this raw, unflinching look at the brutal reality of combat and the deep, deep psychological trauma it inflicted.
And this, right here, is the key. Graves wasn't writing about grand strategies or troop movements. No, he was all about the personal. His work drags you right into the mind of a soldier, makes you feel that psychological weight, the utter futility of it all. And that focus, that obsession with what happens to the human psyche under insane pressure, that became his calling card.
Now get ready for a serious pivot. We're leaving the muddy trenches of the Western Front and jumping all the way back to the political heart of the Roman Empire. It sounds like a total 180, right? But as you're about to see, maybe the subject didn't change as much as you think.
So in 1934, he drops I, Claudius, and it is a game changer. The absolute genius of it is the format, a secret autobiography. By having Claudius tell you his own story, Graves makes history feel like a confession, a secret you're being let in on. He pulls you right into the paranoia and moral decay of Rome.
And man, does he bring these historical figures to life. We're talking Augustus, Tiberius, the totally unhinged Caligula. But here's the thing. They aren't just names in a textbook or cold marble statues. He makes them feel like real, messy, flawed people, consumed by power struggles and navigating this insane web of betrayal.
And this is where it all clicks together. See? Whether it's a soldier in a trench or an emperor in a palace, Graves is obsessed with the same thing, the human mind under extreme pressure. For a guy who watched civilization collapse into mud and wire, maybe exploring ancient corruption wasn't just a history project. It was a way of processing his own trauma, of seeing the same dark human patterns playing out centuries earlier. The setting changed, but the core investigation never did.
But Graves wasn't finished exploring, not by a long shot. After tackling war and power, he turned his focus inward, moving from history to something far more ancient and mysterious, the world of myth and the very source of poetry itself.
So in his later work, he really does shift gears. He just dives headfirst into mythology, religion, and this huge fundamental question of what it even means to be a poet. This whole exploration comes together in his most challenging and maybe most influential work of criticism, The White Goddess.
So what's the big idea behind The White Goddess? Okay, look, it's a dense and kind of wild book, but here's the gist. Graves argued that all true poetry is inspired by a single powerful female deity, the Muse. He believed poetry and myth were completely intertwined, and that the poet's real job wasn't just to write, but to serve this divine figure, making the whole creative act a kind of sacred ritual. A pretty radical idea for sure.
Now, while it was definitely controversial, you can't deny the book's impact. It became a key reference for anyone discussing how myth and creativity connect to modern literature. For Graves, you get the sense that this was his ultimate answer to the chaos he'd seen, a search for a timeless, sacred order that holds all of human creation together.
So, we have the soldier, the historian, and the mystic. Three seemingly different writers,
all housed in one man. But what if they aren't so different after all? Let's bring all these threads together.
When you lay his major works out side by side, a clear pattern just jumps out at you. Goodbye to All That is all about the psychology of survival. I, Claudius, explores the psychology of power, and The White Goddess digs into the psychology or even the spirituality of creation itself. See? Each time, in its own way, it's a deep dive into the human mind.
So here's the bottom line. The common thread running through all of Robert Graves's work is this profound fascination with the human experience. He just used history and mythology as different lenses to examine the same thing, the recurring patterns of our behavior, whether we're on a battlefield, in the halls of power, or in the very act of creating something.
And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. We've seen him as a soldier, a historian, and a mystic. Each of these personas gave us a unique window into his obsessions. So the question for us to consider is, which of these faces, which of these worlds, ultimately tells us the most, not just about Robert Graves, but about our